Once, in a quiet Nigerian village near the wide banks of the river Niger, there lived a young girl named Amara Okafor. She was only 19, yet her presence was striking, like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Her skin was deep and smooth, her eyes gentle but watchful, carrying the innocence of a child and the quiet endurance of someone who had suffered too much. Life had not been kind to her. Orphaned at 11, Amara had grown up under the roof of her uncle Emeka and his wife Ifeoma. But rather than treat her like family, they turned her into their housemaid. While her cousins laughed and strutted around, Amara swept floors, hauled firewood, and fetched water before dawn. Every shout, every insult, every slap of mockery fell on her shoulders. Yet she endured, answering cruelty with silence, and still found the strength to greet neighbors with respect, to smile at strangers, to help even when no one helped her. Amara Okafor was only 19, but her days felt twice as long as anyone else's in the village. At the first crow of the rooster, before her cousins even stirred in their sleep, she was already up, carrying a clay pot on her head, walking barefoot to the stream that curled through the village. The morning mist clung to her wrapper, and the cold water numbed her fingers as she filled the pot. Still, she never complained. She would whisper to herself, "If I move fast enough, Uncle Emeka will not shout today." When she returned, she swept the compound until the ground was smooth like polished clay. Then she lit the firewood stove, coughing as smoke stung her eyes, and prepared the morning porridge. By the time her uncle and aunt rose from their bed, food was ready, water was warm, and the house was already in order. Yet no thank you ever came. Her aunt Ifeoma often barked, "Amara, wash these plates now," even when Amara's hands were still covered in ashes from cooking. If she hesitated for a heartbeat, another insult followed. "Do you think your beauty will carry you out of this house? Lazy girl, foolish girl." Her cousins, Ngozi and Chidinma, joined in. They mocked her clothes, faded wrappers, passed down from neighbors, and laughed when her sandals broke. If Amara spoke back, she would sleep outside under the mango tree. If she cried, they called her a pretender. Silence became her safest answer. Yet, despite the cruelty, Amara carried a gentleness that no one could steal. In the market, she always greeted elders with a slight bow, balancing firewood on her head with quiet dignity. She helped women lift heavy baskets of yam, even when her own arms ached. When children stumbled, she picked them up and wiped the dust from their faces. She never joined in mocking laughter. People noticed. One old woman selling cola nuts once whispered to another, "That girl, Amara, she has a heart too soft for this house she lives in." The other shook her head. "But soft hearts are often crushed, my sister." They both sighed as Amara passed by, carrying a basin full of water with careful steps, offering them a respectful smile. At the food stall near the village square, men sometimes paused their talk when Amara came to buy pepper or salt for Aunt Ifeoma. "Is that Emeka's niece?" one asked quietly. "Yes," another replied, "the orphan girl. They treat her like a servant, but see how she still greets everyone with respect." Back at home, her uncle Emeka pretended not to hear such things. He sat on his wooden bench, chewing bitter cola, barking orders at Amara as if she were born to obey. "Bring me my wrapper. Fetch me palm wine. Did I not tell you to clean the goat shed?" Nothing was ever enough. But in the quiet of her heart, Amara carried memories of her parents. She remembered her father's laughter before the fire that destroyed their home, her mother's soft singing while braiding her hair. At night, lying on her thin mat, staring at the leaking zinc roof, she whispered prayers into the dark. "God, see me. Do not forget me." The world saw a girl bent under chores, living on scraps, treated as a burden. But inside Amara, a flame still burned, small, quiet, steady. She did not yet know that this flame would one day outshine the very people who tried to smother it. For now, she endured. Day by day, step by step, with the patience of someone who had no one else to lean on. It began quietly, almost like a whisper in the wind. At first, it was just a polite greeting from a young man at the market, a nod of respect as Amara carried a bundle of firewood on her head. "Good afternoon, Amara," he said. She blushed, answered softly, and kept walking. But others noticed. Soon, men who came from the nearby towns, men in pressed shirts and polished shoes, started visiting Uncle Emeka's house. Some claimed they wanted to see Ngozi, others came asking about Chidinma. Aunt Ifeoma would beam with pride, smoothing her daughter's wrappers, painting their lips with borrowed powder. "My girls are beautiful, like the daughters of queens," she would boast. But when these men laid eyes on Amara, her calm gaze, her quiet strength, the way she bent her head in respect while serving water, their intentions shifted. One trader from Onitsha pulled Uncle Emeka aside, whispering, "I came for your daughter, but who is that other girl? The one with the gentle eyes?" Another suitor, a well-dressed man in a tinted car, pointed through the window. "That girl, carrying firewood, who is she? I want to know her name." Uncle Emeka's face tightened. He cleared his throat and lied quickly, "She is only a distant relative, not for marriage." But his lie could not cover the truth. The attention that should have gone to Ngozi and Chidinma was drifting toward Amara. That evening, thunder rolled through the compound. Aunt Ifeoma's voice was sharp, cutting the air like a knife. "So you are the one blocking your sister's shine," she screamed, throwing Amara's sandals outside. "Every man comes here and changes his mouth because of you. What charm have you put in your body?" Amara shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't even speak to them," she whispered. "Shut your mouth," Uncle Emeka roared, his palms slapping the wooden table. "You think you are special because of small beauty? I will make sure you never smell marriage, even if I have to give you to a madman." From that day, the house turned colder. Amara was no longer allowed to eat at the same table. The bathroom door was locked. She had to bathe at the backyard tap. When visitors came, Ngozi and Chidinma mocked her openly. "Go wear your rags. Maybe a rich man will notice you again," Ngozi sneered. At the market, gossip spread like wildfire. "Did you hear?" one woman whispered as she pounded yam. "A suitor came for Ifeoma's daughter but left asking for Amara." Another replied, "No wonder they treat her worse now. Envy is a poison." The laughter of her cousins grew sharper, their words heavier. Yet Amara stayed silent. She lowered her head, wiped her tears in secret, and kept working. But inside her, something began to crack. She wondered if life would ever offer her kindness, or if she was destined only to be hated for a beauty she never asked for. The storm inside the household did not die down. Instead, it grew fiercer with every passing day. Uncle Emeka's threat hung over Amara's head like a curse. "You will marry a madman if possible. You will never smell marriage." Those words pierced her heart deeper than any slap. From that night onward, her place in the family sank even lower. She was no longer allowed to sit with them for meals. While Ngozi and Chidinma ate yam and stew from clean plates, Amara was handed cold leftovers in a tin bowl. She ate outside, near the goat pen, while her Aunt Ifeoma locked the kitchen door behind her. Bathing became another punishment. The bathroom door was bolted, and Aunt Ifeoma hissed, "Go and wash yourself at the backyard tap. That is where you belong." So Amara bathed under the open sky, praying neighbors would not notice her shame. The cold water numbed her skin, but not the sting in her heart. Her cousins enjoyed every moment of her humiliation. When visitors came to the house, they whispered loud enough for Amara to hear. "Go and parade your hips," Chidinma mocked. "Maybe another suitor will leave us for you." Ngozi laughed and added, "Yes, wear your rags, village queen." Their words were daggers, but Amara never fought back. She bent lower, swept harder, carried heavier loads. Silence was her shield. Yet silence did not protect her heart at night. On her thin mat, staring at the zinc roof full of holes, she remembered her parents. She saw her mother's hands, rough but gentle, weaving her hair before bed. She heard her father's voice, strong and calm, telling her, "Amara, kindness is never wasted." Then came the fire, the blaze that swallowed their home and left her in her uncle's care. She wondered if that fire had not only taken her parents but also set her fate aflame, condemning her to endless suffering. Still, beyond the pain, she carried hope like a secret seed. In the quiet of her heart, she prayed, "God, if you see me, if you hear me, Let this not be the end of my story." Meanwhile, outside her uncle's compound, gossip continued to spread. In the market, women selling tomatoes shook their heads. "That girl is suffering too much," one said. "She does everything, yet her aunt treats her like dirt." Another replied, "But haven't you seen how she still greets everyone politely? Even me, when I dropped my basket, she ran to help." But inside the house, kindness was never returned. One evening, Uncle Emeka barked at her. "Didn't I warn you? Don't look at me like a carved stone. You think you are something? I will break that pride." His hand flew across her cheek, sharp and stinging. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly lowered her head, afraid to make it worse. The cruelty was not just physical. It was a daily erosion of her dignity. Every chore was turned into punishment. If she fetched water, Aunt Ifeoma accused her of wasting time. If she swept the floor, Ngozi poured soapy water to dirty it again. If she washed clothes, Chidinma mocked, "Scrub harder, servant girl." And yet, Amara's heart refused to harden. She still greeted elders respectfully. She still helped neighbors carry loads. Even when her stomach was empty, she gave her last piece of bread to a hungry child who wandered near the compound. People in the village shook their heads. "This girl has the patience of Job," an old man muttered. But Amara did not think of herself as patient or strong. She thought of herself as trapped, like a bird in a cage, too small to stretch its wings. And every insult, every slap, every mocking laugh was another bar in that cage. What she did not know was that beyond the bars, change was already walking toward her slowly, with a limp, leaning on a wooden stick. It was a Saturday afternoon, hot and heavy, when the stranger came. Dust clung to his clothes, and a crooked hat covered most of his face. He leaned on a wooden walking stick, his limp, slow and uneven. Children playing by the roadside stopped and stared. "Who is that?" one boy whispered. "Looks like a beggar," another answered, tossing a pebble across the ground. The man did not scold them, nor did he hurry. Step by step, he made his way into Uncle Emeka's compound. His presence drew eyes from every corner of the village. Old women paused their grinding. Young men whispered behind their palms. Where is he going? Why to Emeka's house? Inside the compound, Amara knelt near the washing stones, scrubbing clothes. She lifted her head just long enough to catch a glimpse of the stranger's silhouette. His clothes were torn, but his posture was strange, not hunched like a beggar's, but measured, deliberate. He whispered something to Uncle Emeka, and though Amara could not hear the words, she saw her uncle's eyes widen, then glow like he had just found hidden treasure. "You're serious?" Uncle Emeka asked, his voice a harsh whisper. "You want to marry her?" The man nodded once, slow but steady. His voice was low, calm, almost unsettling in its confidence. "I have enough for someone who is humble." They shook hands firmly, not like family sealing a blessing, but like two traders closing a business deal. From her corner, Amara's heart dropped. She pressed her wet hands to her wrapper, whispering silently, "God, what is happening?" News of the stranger spread faster than smoke. By evening, half the market was buzzing. "Did you hear?" one palm wine tapper said to another. A limping beggar went to Emeka's house asking for the orphan girl. Another woman selling gari shook her head. "What kind of husband is that? Shame will bury the poor child alive." But one man frowned. "I saw his hands when he bought kola nut. Clean hands, that is no ordinary beggar." Back at the house, Auntie Fioma called a family meeting. She sat with arms folded, lips twisted. "It is settled," she announced. "We have found a husband for Amara." Ngozi burst into laughter. "Who is he? A prince from the city?" Chidinma joined in. "No, a cripple with rags for clothes." "Enough," Uncle Emeka barked, though his eyes were still shining with greed. "He is willing to take her without bride price, without demands. We are doing her a favor." Amara looked at them, her lips trembling. "But, who is he? Why me?" "You don't need to ask questions," Aunt Ifeoma snapped. 2 weeks from now, you will be his wife. Be grateful you are not thrown out this very night." Amara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. 2 weeks? Married to a man she had never met. A man everyone called a beggar? That night, she lay awake on her mat, staring at the holes in the zinc roof. Wind whistled through the cracks, mocking her. She hugged her knees and whispered, "Is this my life? To be given away like a broken pot?" The next day, she saw him again. He was sitting quietly at the village square, scattering groundnuts for the birds. His clothes were dusty, yet his nails were trimmed. His hands did not shake, and when Amara dared to greet him shyly, he turned his head and said her name as though he had known it all along. That evening, Uncle Emeka gathered everyone under the mango tree. His voice was heavy with self-importance, like a chief announcing a festival. "Amara, sit down," he commanded. She obeyed, her hands trembling. "We have found a husband for you," he said. His words fell like stones. Her lips parted. "Who is he?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "You don't need to know," Aunt Ifeoma cut in sharply. "He is willing to take you as you are. No bride price, no demands. Just pack your cursed beauty and leave." Ngozi snorted. Maybe she wanted Dangote's son. "Shut up," Aunt Ifeoma snapped. "We are doing her a favor. The wedding is in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The words echoed in Amara's ears. Without her consent, without her choice, her life had been sold in a handshake. That night, she lay on her thin mattress, staring at the zinc roof riddled with holes. Wind whistled through the gaps, mocking her. Sleep refused to come. She whispered into the darkness, "Is this all my life will ever be?" The next morning, as she fetched water at the square, she saw him again, the stranger with the limp. He sat on a low stool, feeding birds with groundnuts. His clothes were still dirty, but his back was straighter than before. Amara hesitated, then whispered, "Good afternoon, sir." He turned, his eyes calm. "Amara," he said softly. Her breath caught. "You know my name. I heard your uncle shout it yesterday," he replied. Her heart pounded. You are the one I am to marry?" "Yes." His voice was steady, almost gentle. She lowered her eyes. "Why me?" He studied her for a moment. "Because you are different." "Different how?" she asked, confused. He only smiled, stood slowly, and picked up his walking stick. "See you soon, Amara." He walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. That night, her cousins wasted no time mocking her. "I heard you were talking to your beggar husband," Chidinma sneered. Ngozi cackled. "Better get used to using leaves. He can't even afford soap." Amara said nothing. Her silence only fed their laughter. Days passed quickly. Aunt Ifeoma began preparing for the wedding, not with joy, but with spite. She threw a torn lace gown onto Amara's bed. "Here, this is what you'll wear." Amara opened the bag. The gown was old, yellowed with age, torn at the sleeve and stained at the hem. "This is not even clean," she whispered. "Do you want me to buy new clothes for a wedding I didn't plan?" Aunt Ifeoma hissed. "Be grateful I gave you anything at all." Amara clutched the gown in her hands, her chest heavy. That night, under the moonlight, she tried to mend the tears with needle and thread borrowed from a neighbor. Her fingers pricked, her eyes blurred with tears. She whispered, "Even if they dress me in rags, I will not let them break me completely." The village buzzed with gossip. Women at the market whispered, "So she is to marry that cripple? Ehya, what a shame." Another shook her head. "But I saw him once, and something in his eyes did not look like poverty." Yet most laughed cruelly. Her beauty thought it would take her far. Look at her now. Every word reached Amara's ears. She walked with her head lowered, not out of guilt, but to shield herself from the weight of their scorn. Inside, her heart wrestled with fear and a strange, quiet peace. Somewhere deep, she felt her story would not end the way they wished. Still, the countdown had begun. 2 weeks until she would stand beside a man she barely knew. 2 weeks until her fate was sealed in front of the whole village. 2 weeks until the world would call her the beggar's bride. The days slipped by like water through fingers, and the night before the wedding crept closer with every breath. Amara spent her daylight hours carrying endless chores, her aunt barking louder than usual, her cousins watching with cruel smiles. But when the sun went down and the compound grew quiet, a strange rhythm began, moments she could not explain, moments that kept her awake long after everyone else had fallen asleep. The first time was behind the goat shed. She had been sitting on a stone, hugging her knees, her eyes fixed on the moon. Its light was soft, the kind of light that makes even broken things look gentle. Suddenly, a shadow fell across her. She gasped, turning quickly. It was him, the stranger with the limp, the man who would soon be her husband. "You're not sleeping," he said softly. Amara's heart leapt to her throat. "Why are you here?" she whispered. "If Uncle sees you—" "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'll leave soon. I just wanted to talk." Her eyes narrowed. "Talk? About what?" "About us," he said simply. "About the wedding." Her stomach tightened. "What about it?" He stepped closer but kept his distance, as though respecting an invisible line. "I know this is not what you wanted," he said. "I know you are not happy." She looked away, unable to trust her own voice. "But I want you to know something," he continued. "I will never force you. If, after the wedding, you wish to leave, I will let you go." Her head jerked up, eyes wide. "Why would you say that?" "Because I am not here to punish you," he answered. "I only wanted someone who could look at me and still see a human being, not an object of pity." His words sank into her chest like a seed. She remembered the way he had spoken in the square, the way he fed birds with patience. Something about him was not what it seemed. The second time came 2 nights later. Amara was peeling cassava under the moonlight, her fingers moving slowly, her mind elsewhere. The compound was silent, except for the distant beat of a drum from another village, carried by the wind. She sensed him before she saw him, the faint shuffle of his limp approaching the back of the house. "You like appearing at night," she said, her voice weary. He smiled faintly. "It is the only time I can speak to you without being chased away." Amara set the cassava aside, folding her arms. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "I'm not afraid of you," she replied honestly. "I'm afraid of what comes next." His eyes, calm and steady, met hers. "You are stronger than you know." She frowned. "Why do you talk like someone who is not what you appear to be?" He gave a half-smile but did not answer. "Who are you, really?" she pressed. "I'm the man who wants to marry you," he said. "That is not an answer," she insisted. "Maybe one day," he replied softly, "I will give you the real one." And then, like before, he melted into the night, leaving her with 100 questions. Rumors began to swirl in the village. Someone had seen the beggar, fixing a kettle for a neighbor, tying it with metal wire so neatly it worked again. Another swore they heard him speak English to a madman at the market, calming him instantly. "A beggar that speaks English?" The women whispered at the palm oil stall. "That one is hiding something." Amara heard the whispers too, and when she lay down on her mat at night, she thought of his words. "If you want to leave, I will let you go." It was a strange comfort, like a candle burning in the dark. She did not love him, not yet. She did not even understand him. But for the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as cursed, but as a person. The morning of the wedding came without joy, without drums, without even the faint smell of celebration. The sky hung gray, not heavy enough to promise rain, but dull enough to mirror the heaviness in Amara's chest. She stood before a cracked mirror in her small room, staring at the torn lace gown hanging loosely on her shoulders. The powder Aunt Ifioma had thrown at her face clung unevenly, making her skin look pale, almost ghost-like. Her lips were dry, her eyes tired. She did not look like a bride. She looked like a prisoner being led to judgment. From the courtyard came hurried voices. "Ngozi, bring out the second bench. Chidinma, sweep the floor before guests step inside." Guests, if they could even be called that. Just a few neighbors curious to see the orphan girl's shame, and the pastor, who looked more eager to leave than to stay. When Amara stepped into the sitting room, all eyes turned to her. Some mouths curled into smirks, others whispered behind their hands. "That is her," one woman muttered. "The one marrying the beggar." Another chuckled softly. She thought her beauty would carry her far. Look at her now. Her cousins sat proudly at the corner, their wrappers neatly tied, faces glowing with powder. They glanced at Amara and exchanged mocking smiles. Auntie Fioma stood tall, pretending to be gracious. Uncle Emeka cleared his throat like a man hosting a grand event, though nothing about the room was grand. The pastor adjusted his glasses and opened his Bible. His voice was rushed, mechanical. He read a short verse about love and patience, but his tone was flat, like someone reading because duty demanded it. Then he turned to the groom. "Do you, Chike Obiakor, take this woman as your wife?" Chike's reply was calm, steady. "I do." The pastor looked at Amara. Her throat was dry, her palms damp. She glanced around the room. Her uncle's eyes were cold, her aunt's face hard as stone, her cousin smirking. But when her gaze met Chike's, she saw something else, eyes that were not mocking, not greedy, not cruel. Eyes that were kind. "I do," she whispered. The pastor snapped his Bible shut. "By the power given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may go." That was it. No applause, no ululations, no rice thrown into the air, just silence. The silence of a wedding that felt more like a funeral. Amara lowered her eyes, clutching the edge of her torn gown. The whispers of the neighbors pressed into her ears. Such shame, a beauty wasted. Better to stay single than marry a beggar. Their words stung, but she did not cry. She had no tears left. Chike reached for her hand. "Let's go," he said quietly. Together, they walked out of the house. Auntie Fioma did not say goodbye. Uncle Emeka did not look back. Ngozi and Chidinma snickered as the couple passed, as though mocking footsteps could erase what had just happened. Outside, a few children followed, giggling. One pointed and whispered, "That's the beggar's bride." Amara kept her head lowered, but inside her chest a storm raged. Is this truly my life? Is this what they think I deserve? And yet, beneath the storm, a strange calm remained. Something told her the story was not finished, that this wedding, as humiliating as it was not the end but the beginning of something none of them could yet imagine. When the pastor's hurried words ended and the neighbors' whispers died down, Amara followed Chike out of the house. Her feet were heavy, dragging as if every step chained her to the compound she longed to leave. Behind her, the laughter of her cousins floated like bitter smoke, the last sting of a home that had never truly been hers. The path leading from the compound was narrow, edged with dry weeds and scattered stones. Children ran ahead, shouting, "The beggar's bride is leaving." Some clapped mockingly, others simply stared with wide eyes. A few older women folded their arms, shaking their heads. "Poor girl," one said, "her life is finished before it even began." Amara kept her eyes on the ground. Each word pierced her, yet she refused to break. Beside her, Chike walked steadily, his limp still visible but his posture unshaken. He did not answer the jeers. He did not slow his pace. His silence was a shield, and Amara found herself hiding beneath it. They passed the village square. Normally, on a wedding day, drums would thunder and women would sing, but today there was only quiet curiosity. A man selling roasted maize leaned on his stall, muttering, "A marriage without joy is no marriage at all." Another replied, "But who knows? Sometimes God hides gold in rags." At the edge of the village, Amara expected Chike to turn toward the bush path the kind beggars took to sleep under trees. But instead, he led her toward the main road. Confused, she hesitated. "Are we not going to the bush?" she asked softly. "No," Chike replied. "We have a car." Amara's steps faltered. A car? Her heart thudded against her ribs. When they rounded the bend, her eyes widened. Parked beneath the shade of an old Iroko tree was a black SUV, polished, silent, imposing. A driver in a crisp shirt stepped forward quickly, bowing his head. "Good afternoon, sir," he said, opening the back door with practiced hands. Amara froze. The world tilted. "Sir?" she thought. Her gaze darted from the driver to the SUV, then to Chike, whose calm expression gave nothing away. Chike turned to her gently. "Sit," he said, You are safe now." Her legs moved as if in a dream. She slid into the cool leather seat, her torn gown crinkling awkwardly against the luxury. The air inside smelled faintly of cologne and new upholstery, nothing like the smoke and dust she had always known. The door shut, and silence enveloped her. The hum of the engine soon followed, smooth and steady. As the SUV rolled away from the village, Amara clutched her hands in her lap, her heart racing. Outside the window, familiar mud huts and mango trees blurred, growing smaller with every mile. She stole a glance at Chaik. He sat upright, no longer looking like a beggar. The way he leaned into the seat, the quiet confidence in his posture, even the way he adjusted his wrist as if used to watches that no longer adorned it, none of this fit the picture of a poor man. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Please, tell me the truth. Who are you?" Chaik turned to her, eyes steady. "What doesn't make sense?" he asked. She gestured wildly at the driver, the car, even at the calm way he carried himself. "This," she said, her voice rising, "all of this. You are not a beggar. You have never been." He only smiled softly, leaning back. "I never said I was." Amara's stomach twisted. The village behind her was fading, but the real journey had just begun. She was no longer the beggar's bride in torn lace. She was the wife of a man who carried secrets large enough to fill the SUV's silence. And as the road stretched ahead, she knew one thing for certain. Her life had just stepped into a mystery far greater than shame. The SUV hummed steadily as it left the dusty village roads behind, gliding onto the smoother highway. For the first time in her life, Amara sat on a leather seat cooled by air conditioning. Yet her body was tense, her palms damp. She stared at the man beside her, her new husband, the stranger who had once limped into her uncle's yard in rags. Nothing about him fit anymore. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling, "tell me the truth. Who are you?" Chaik's gaze stayed calm, almost too calm. He looked out the window for a moment, then back at her. "My name is Chaik Obiakor," he said evenly. The name struck something in Amara's memory. She blinked. Obiakor. She had heard it before, whispered in the market, spoken on the radio, printed on the side of lorries. Her breath caught. "Wait, Obiakor. That name." He nodded slowly. "Yes. I am the head of Obiakor Group of Companies." Amara's mouth fell open. Her thoughts tumbled. The Obiakor Group? The company that owned half the transport stations along the eastern routes? She remembered walking to the market once and seeing bold blue letters on a signboard, Obiakor Motors, Enugu to Lagos in comfort. At the time, she had thought only of the people boarding buses, never dreaming she would one day sit beside the man who owned them all. Her lips quivered. "No, no, it cannot be." "It is," Chaik said quietly. "I built it after my father passed. Real estate, transport, agriculture. My name is on the company boards you may have seen in Lagos, Onitsha, Asaba." Amara shook her head, her mind spinning. She remembered another moment. A year ago, a neighbor had played his radio too loudly, broadcasting the business news. The announcer spoke of a man named Chike Obiakor, one of the youngest tycoons in the country, who had quietly expanded his empire while avoiding the spotlight. Amara had listened absent-mindedly, never once imagining that the man they praised could be the same man her uncle had sold her to. Her voice cracked. You are not a beggar. You were never a beggar." Chaik leaned back, his expression calm. "I never said I was." Her chest rose and fell quickly. Anger, confusion, fear all clashed inside her. "But why? Why pretend? Why come to my uncle's house in rags? Why limp through the market like a cripple? Why let the whole village laugh at me, at us?" Chike's eyes softened. "Because I needed to know the truth. About your uncle. About your family. About you." Amara's lips trembled. "About me?" "Yes." His voice was low but steady. "In a world where money blinds people, I wanted to see who would look at me and still see a man. Not a title, not a wallet, just a human being." Her mind reeled. She remembered how he had spoken English so fluently to the madman in the market, how he had fixed a broken kettle with ease. She remembered his clean nails, his calm eyes, the way he carried himself even in rags. The signs had always been there, but she had been too weighed down by shame to notice. She pressed her hands against her chest, whispering, "God, is this real?" Chaik leaned closer, his voice firm. "It is real. My father once trusted your uncle, and he betrayed that trust, costing us land and money. But I did not come back for revenge. I came back to see if there was still light in that house, and I found you." Amara's throat tightened. She could not speak. "You were the only one," he continued, "who did not laugh at me, who did not mock me when I looked broken. You greeted me with respect. You offered me water when others turned away. That is why I chose you." Tears blurred Amara's vision. She turned to the window, the landscape rushing by palm trees, red earth, scattered huts. The girl she had been that morning, mocked as the beggar's bride, seemed to be dissolving in the distance. In her place sat a woman caught between terror and awe, her future unfolding in ways she had never imagined. The SUV turned from the busy road onto a wide private lane paved with smooth stones. Tall fences rose on either side, lined with flowers Amara had only ever seen in wedding magazines passed from one hand to another in the market. Her heart hammered. She pressed her palms together on her lap, as if steadying herself against a storm. At the end of the lane stood golden gates, taller than any house in her village. Cameras blinked like silent eyes. As the SUV approached, the gates opened slowly, soundless, as though welcoming royalty. Amara's breath caught. She thought of the rusty compound gate back home, always creaking and half-broken. The difference stabbed at her chest. When the SUV stopped, men in dark suits hurried forward. One opened the door. "Welcome, sir," he said, bowing slightly. Then he turned to Amara and added with equal respect, "Welcome, madam." Amara froze. Madam. No one had ever called her that. In her uncle's house, she had been lazy girl, foolish orphan, curse. Now, strangers bowed to her as though she was someone important. Her legs trembled as she stepped out, her torn lace gown hanging awkwardly against the polished stone driveway. Servants lined up on either side of the entrance, dressed in neat uniforms. "Good afternoon, madam," they chorused. Amara lowered her eyes, embarrassed. She wanted to tell them they had the wrong person, that she was no madam, just a girl who washed plates and fetched water. But their greetings wrapped around her, undeniable. Chaik took her hand gently. "Come," he said. Together they entered the house. Marble floors stretched beneath their feet, gleaming so brightly Amara could almost see her reflection. Chandeliers hung overhead, casting golden light across the vast hall. A staircase curved upward like something from a palace. Every corner glowed with polish and order. Amara's eyes darted everywhere, portraits on the wall, a grand clock ticking softly, the scent of fresh flowers mixed with the faint aroma of food from the kitchen. Her heart raced. She felt like a thief in a dream, afraid someone would wake her and throw her back onto her thin mat at Uncle Emeka's compound. Her sandals made faint sounds against the marble, and she grew self-conscious. The torn sleeve of her gown brushed against her arm, reminding her of where she came from. She folded her arms across her chest, wishing she could vanish. Chaik noticed. "Don't hide," he said quietly. "This is your home now." Home. The word cut through her like fire and water all at once. For years, she had never had a true home, just a place where she was tolerated. And now this man, once a beggar in her eyes, was telling her this mansion was hers. They passed the dining hall, where a long table gleamed with silver cutlery and fine plates. Staff stood ready, hands folded politely. Amara glanced at the bowls of food, steaming gently. Her stomach tightened. She remembered the cold scraps she had eaten alone near the goat pen just days ago. They entered a lounge with soft chairs and wide windows overlooking a garden. Flowers bloomed in precise rows, fountains danced in the sunlight. The beauty pressed against Amara's chest until she could barely breathe. She whispered, "It feels like a dream." Chaiki looked at her gently. "It is not a dream. This is your reality now." Amara shook her head. "But why me? I was nothing. I had nothing." "You had what money cannot buy," Chaike said. "Kindness, patience, a heart that still shines even after being trampled. Her eyes blurred. She looked away, afraid the staff might see her tears. Later, a maid guided her upstairs. The room prepared for her was large, with curtains of soft gold swaying in the breeze. A bed wide enough for 3 people stood in the center, its sheets white and smooth. A wardrobe stretched across the wall, already filled with dresses she had never seen before. Amara touched the fabric, trembling. She remembered washing her cousin's hand-me-downs by the stream, scrubbing until her fingers bled. Now she was staring at silk and lace finer than anything she had ever touched. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her hands. "God," she whispered, "what have you done to me?" For the first time in years, her heart did not ache with hunger or fear. It ached with disbelief. She was safe, surrounded by wealth, yet still carrying the weight of every insult, every slap, every laugh from her uncle's house. But one thing was certain. She was no longer the orphan girl mocked as cursed. She was Amara Obiekor now, wife to a man whose secrets were slowly unfolding, and whose power had already begun to change her story. That evening, after the servants withdrew, and the mansion grew quiet, Chike led Amara into a study. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. A single lamp glowed on the desk, throwing warm light over shelves filled with files and framed photographs. Amara perched on the edge of a chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Chike did not speak at first. He stood by the window, staring out into the dark garden, his shoulders heavy. Finally, he turned. "There is something you must know," he said quietly. Amara's breath caught. The way his voice sank told her it was no small matter. "My father was a strong man," Chike began. "Honest, hardworking. He built his business from nothing, just one small bus running between Onitsha and Enugu. He drove it himself, fixed it himself, and counted every naira with care. By the time I was 15, he had more than 20 buses. People respected him." Amara listened closely. She remembered evenings at her uncle's house when Emeka would sit outside, boasting. "I used to run with the big men," he would say, tapping his chest. "Deals, land, money you children don't know." At the time, she thought it was just empty talk. Now her stomach twisted, Chike's jaw clenched. But not everyone celebrated his success. Some men wanted quick riches. Your uncle was one of them. He came to my father with a land deal. Said he had connections with a royal family. Promised that if we invested, we would double our value overnight. Amara's mouth went dry. She gripped the edge of her chair, hearing her uncle's voice echo in her memory, his laughter, his swagger. She had never once imagined the shadow beneath it. "My father trusted him," Chike continued. "He treated him like family. He believed his words. But the documents were forged. The land had already been sold, not once but twice. By the time my father discovered the truth, everything was gone. His money, his reputation, the trust people had in him." Amara's chest tightened. She saw her father's kind face in memory, though dim now after so many years, and she imagined what it would be like to lose everything because of betrayal. "My father tried to fight back," Chike said. "He went to the courts, he begged the chiefs. But the shame was heavy. Rumors spread. They said he was greedy, careless. Nobody knew your uncle had orchestrated the whole thing. My father fell ill. The stress ate him alive. Within a year, he was gone." Chike's voice cracked at the last word, though he quickly steadied himself. He looked away, blinking hard. Amara felt her throat burn. Her uncle's lies had not only stolen money, they had stolen a man's life. She thought of all the times Aunt Ifeoma and her cousins mocked her, telling her she was cursed, telling her she would never know joy. Yet it was they who had hidden behind wealth stolen in shadows. "So you came back to punish them?" she whispered. Chike shook his head firmly. "No, I came for the truth. Revenge doesn't heal. I wanted to see if there was anyone left in that house with a clean heart. That's why I returned in rags, walking with a limp. I wanted to know how they would treat a man they thought had nothing." Amara's eyes welled with tears. She remembered how quickly her uncle's face had lit up when Chike whispered about marriage, not caring if he looked like a crippled beggar. It hadn't mattered who Chaik was, it only mattered that he could be rid of her. Chaik stepped closer, his gaze steady. "And I found you, Amara. You did not laugh at me. You did not turn away. You treated me like a human being. That is worth more than any fortune." Amara lowered her head. Shame and sorrow collided in her chest. The man she had been sold to was the son of her uncle's betrayal, and yet here he was offering her respect, even love. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Chaik replied gently. "Just know that your uncle's sins are his own. They are not yours. You were the light that came out of his darkness." The words washed over her like cool rain. For the first time, Amara realized that the weight she had carried of being unwanted, unloved, discarded, had never truly belonged to her. It had been placed on her by people drowning in their own guilt. That night, as she lay in her new room, staring at the soft curtains swaying in the breeze, she thought of her uncle's stern face and her aunt's sharp tongue. She thought of the cousins who laughed when suitors turned their eyes away, and she thought of Chaik's father, a man she had never met, whose life had been stolen by greed. Amara pressed her hand to her chest. Her story was no longer just her own. It was tied to old debts, hidden betrayals, and a legacy that could no longer be buried. The night inside the mansion was too quiet for Amara. The bed was soft, the sheets smelled of lavender, the curtains swayed gently in the breeze, but sleep refused to come. She turned from side to side, her heart restless. The silence itself was strange. Back at her uncle's house, she had always slept with noise, goats bleating, rats scratching, cousins whispering cruel jokes in the next room. Here, the stillness felt heavy, almost frightening. Finally, she rose. Barefoot, she padded across the polished floor and opened the door to the balcony. A rush of cool air brushed her face. The night sky stretched wide, stars scattered like seeds across dark velvet. The garden below glimmered with moonlight, fountains whispering softly. Amara wrapped her arms around herself. She remembered nights when she had curled up on a torn mat outside, forced to sleep in the cold because her aunt said she was pretending to cry. On those nights she had stared at the same stars, praying for rescue. Now she stood on a balcony high above the ground, draped in silence and safety. It felt unreal. "You should be resting," a voice said gently. Amara turned quickly. Chaik stood in the doorway, wearing a simple white shirt, his expression calm but tired. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted softly. He stepped onto the balcony, joining her at the railing. "Neither could I." They stood side by side, watching the garden below. For a while, neither spoke. The air between them was heavy with unspoken fears and questions. Finally, Amara broke the silence. "Why do I feel like I'm dreaming?" she whispered. "This house, the servants, the respect, it doesn't feel like mine. I keep waiting to wake up and find myself back on that mat in the compound." Chike looked at her, his voice steady. "Because your life has changed faster than your heart can accept. But it is real, Amara. You are not going back to that place." She swallowed, her eyes wet. "I'm afraid." "Of me?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "Not of you. Of what comes next. I don't know how to live this kind of life. I don't know how to walk in a place like this without feeling small." Chike leaned closer, resting his hands on the railing. "You don't need to change who you are. That's why I brought you here. Because the woman who carried firewood with dignity, who greeted strangers with kindness, is the same woman who belongs in this house. Wealth does not make you worthy. You were already worthy." Amara pressed her lips together, her chest tightening. For years she had been told she was nothing, cursed, unwanted. Now here was a man telling her she was enough as she was. She whispered, "I don't understand why God would let me suffer for so long only to bring me here now." Chaik's gaze lifted to the stars. "Sometimes, suffering shapes us. Sometimes it teaches us to value what others take for granted. You would not be the Amara I see if you had never walked through pain." His words sank into her heart like warm rain. She turned to him slowly. "And what do you see?" He met her eyes. "A woman who is stronger than she knows. A woman who will not be broken again." Tears slipped down her cheeks. For the first time in years, she did not feel ashamed of them. She let them fall, and Chaike did not look away. He simply stood there, steady as a rock, letting her unravel. After a long silence, she exhaled. "I feel lighter," she admitted. "Good," he said softly. "Because from now on, you will not carry that weight alone." They lingered on the balcony until the night began to cool even further, the breeze brushing their skin. Amara closed her eyes, breathing deeply. This was not the cold of neglect she had known before. It was the coolness of peace, the calm before dawn. When she finally returned to bed, she lay down with a new kind of quiet inside her. For the first time in many years, she believed that morning might bring not more hardship, but hope. The sun was high when the black SUV rolled toward Amara's village. Dust rose behind its tires, catching the light like smoke. Inside the car, Amara sat with her hands pressed tightly in her lap, her gown a simple but elegant dress that shimmered faintly under the sunlight. Beside her, Chaik wore a fitted suit, his calm face unreadable behind dark glasses. Children ran barefoot along the roadside, pointing. "See that car? Who owns it?" Women carrying baskets paused mid-step. Men sitting under the palm tree by the square straightened, murmuring. "It must be a politician," one said. "Or a minister from the city," another guessed. "No, look at the plates," a younger man whispered. "That's not government. That's private, someone rich." The SUV slowed as it entered the square. Doors of small shops swung open, neighbors spilling out to see. The tailor left his sewing machine. The palm wine seller abandoned his gourd. The old drummer leaned on his stick. All eyes turned to the shining car making its way to Emeka's compound. When the vehicle stopped, silence fell. Even the goats wandering nearby stilled, as though they too sensed something unusual. The driver stepped out quickly, opening the back door with practiced care. Chaik emerged first, tall and straight, no trace of the limp he had once carried. His presence alone silenced whispers. Then Amara stepped out. Gasps rippled through the crowd. It was the same girl they had mocked, the one they called cursed, the one forced into marriage with a beggar. But she no longer wore torn lace. Her skin glowed, her dress flowed gracefully, her shoulders were lifted high. She did not bow her head in shame. She looked straight ahead, steady, unbroken. At the gate of the compound, Aunt Ifeoma froze, broom still in her hand. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Cousin Ngozi ran halfway down the path, then stopped, stunned. Chisom peered from the window before ducking away like a guilty thief. And Emeka himself shuffled out slowly, his face pale, his eyes darting from Chaik to Amara, disbelief written across his features. Amara stood still, letting the silence press in. She could feel her heart pounding, but she did not let it show. For once, she was not the orphan trembling at their insults. She was the woman who had walked through fire and returned clothed in dignity. Chike gave a small nod to the driver. The man opened the boot and lifted out a polished wooden box, carrying it forward. Every villager leaned closer, whispering, wondering what treasure it held. Emeka licked his lips, his voice unsteady. What is this?" Chaik stepped closer, his tone calm but cutting through the air like a blade. "This is the debt your family owes me." The words struck like thunder. People shifted, murmuring. Amara's chest tightened. She stepped forward, her eyes fixed on her uncle. "You called me cursed," she said softly, her voice carrying in the stillness. "You told me I would marry a madman. You threw me away like trash." Her aunt's mouth trembled. Ngozi looked down at her bare feet, shame burning across her cheeks. Chisom peeped again from behind the curtain, but quickly vanished. "And yet," Amara continued, her voice steady, "God remembered me." Tears welled in her eyes but did not fall. "I did not come here to insult you. I came to show you that even when a seed is buried, it can still rise." The villagers murmured, nodding slowly. An elder whispered, "It is true." Amara reached into her handbag and drew out a small envelope. She placed it gently on the bench near the compound door. "For you and your daughters," she told Aunt Ifeoma. "Buy something good. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to be like you." Gasps rose again. Some villagers clapped softly. Others shook their heads, amazed. Then Amara turned to face the crowd. "I am not better than anyone here," she said. "I am only proof that your story does not end where others try to bury you." Her voice lingered in the air, clear and strong. She turned back toward the SUV, her steps calm, her heart strangely light. Chaik followed silently, the driver holding the door. As the car pulled away, the villagers remained frozen. Some bowed their heads, some stared in awe, and inside the compound, Emeka sat heavily on the bench, his face blank, his shame laid bare for all to see. 2 days after the visit that shook the village, a young boy arrived at the mansion. He carried a folded letter, the ink shaky, the paper creased from nervous fingers. Amara opened it slowly. The words were brief, almost clumsy. "Please, come. We need to speak." It was signed by her uncle, Emeka. She stared at the note for a long time. Part of her wanted to throw it away. Part of her wanted to ignore it, let them stew in the shame they had earned. But another part, the deeper, quieter part, knew she had to go. Not for them, but for herself. That afternoon, she returned. No grand entrance this time. No convoy, no crowd gathering. Just a single car, no driver, no guards. When she stepped down at the familiar compound, she felt the weight of years pressing against her chest. The gate was the same rusty metal, leaning on broken hinges. The walls were the same mud-stained bricks, patched with straw. But the air was different, silent, heavy, tense. Emeka sat outside on the bench, the same bench where he once barked orders at her. Now his shoulders sagged, his hands trembled slightly in his lap. When he saw her, he rose too quickly, almost stumbling. "Amara," he began, his voice rough. "Thank you for coming." She said nothing yet. Her eyes swept the compound. Ifeoma stood in the doorway, clutching her wrapper, her lips tight but her eyes uncertain. Ngozi and Chisom hovered in the shadows, their faces pale, their usual boldness gone. Amara stepped forward. The dust crunched under her sandals. She stopped just a few feet away, her back straight, her gaze steady. No longer the frightened girl who once scrubbed floors under their insults. Emeka cleared his throat, then spoke again. "I don't know what to say. What we did to you, it was wrong. Very wrong. I have no excuse." His voice faltered. "But I wanted to tell you that I am sorry." Amara let the silence stretch. She studied his face, the lines deeper, the eyes sunken. For the first time, she saw not just cruelty but fear. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. "Why now?" Emeka's head dropped. "Because I see the truth now. You weren't the problem. We were. Our greed, our pride. We broke you down because we couldn't face ourselves." Behind him, Ifeoma sniffed. "We thought we were teaching you humility," she said quietly. "But we were only feeding our bitterness." Amara turned her gaze on her aunt. "You called me cursed. You told me no man would ever want me. You made me feel like a mistake." Ifeoma's eyes filled with tears, but no words came. Then Amara turned toward her cousins. "You laughed when I cried. You mocked me when men noticed me instead of you. You poured soapy water where I cleaned. You told me I would beg for food all my life." Ngozi lowered her head, shame staining her cheeks. Chisom bit her lip hard, fighting back tears. Amara's throat tightened, but she forced herself to continue. "Even if you hated me, you didn't have to sell me off like a slave. You didn't have to throw me away because others saw something good in me." The compound was silent except for the sound of her own breathing. Then Amara drew a slow breath and said, "But I forgive you." Every head lifted. The words hung in the air, unbelievable. "I forgive you," she repeated. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I will not carry your sins any longer." Her uncle's lips trembled. Ifeoma covered her face with her wrapper. The cousins wept silently. Amara reached into her handbag and pulled out a small envelope. She placed it on the bench, where her uncle had once struck her, with words sharper than any cane. "Use this," she said. "Fix the leaking roof. Mend the broken bench. Let this house at least give you shelter." Emeka looked at the envelope but did not touch it. Tears slid down his weathered cheeks. "We don't deserve this." Amara straightened. "Maybe not. But mercy is not about deserving. It is about breaking the chain." With that, she turned. She walked back through the gate with quiet dignity, her head high, her heart strangely light. For the first time, the weight of her past seemed to lift from her shoulders, leaving only strength behind. Weeks passed, and the memory of the confrontation at the compound began to fade into the quiet rhythm of Amara's new life. But inside her heart, something stronger than relief was taking root: purpose. She had been rescued from humiliation, lifted from dust to dignity. Now she wanted to make sure other women, other orphans, would not have to walk the same lonely road she had. One bright morning, she and Chike visited a half-finished compound on the outskirts of town. Cement blocks stood in neat stacks, foundations stretched wide, and the air buzzed with the clang of hammers. Men carried sand, women arranged bricks, and children darted between them, laughing. "This will be the women's hostel," Amara explained, pointing to the structure taking shape. "For those who have no homes." Chike nodded. "And that side?" "A skill center," she said proudly, "where widows and orphans will learn tailoring, baking, soap making, anything that can help them stand on their own feet." The workers looked at her with admiration. To them she wasn't just Chike's wife, living in wealth. She was one of their own, an orphan who had survived hardship. They listened when she spoke, because her story was theirs. Later that week, the first group of women arrived. They were shy at first, carrying babies on their backs, clutching small bags with nothing inside but a wrapper and hope. Amara welcomed each one warmly, shaking their hands, embracing them. "You are not charity," she told them. "You are builders of tomorrow." Inside the center, sewing machines lined one wall, while ovens and mixing bowls filled another. The air soon filled with the hum of machines and the sweet smell of baking bread. Amara walked among them, correcting a stitch here, tasting a loaf there. She was not a distant figure giving orders. She worked beside them, her laughter ringing through the hall. One afternoon, as she sat with a group of widows learning to sew, an old woman touched her arm. "Madam," the woman said softly, "you don't act like someone rich, you act like one of us." Amara smiled. "That's because I am one of you. I will never forget." The word spread, and within weeks, women began calling her Neoma, good mother. But her vision did not stop there. She wanted to speak to the younger generation too, the girls, who reminded her of herself at 13, 14, when she had no voice and no choice. So one Saturday, she stood before a hall of young girls in the town center. The room was crowded: orphans, school dropouts, daughters of farmers who barely scraped by. Some wore shoes too small for their feet, others clutched notebooks with only a few pages left. Amara stepped up to the front, her dress simple, her hair tied back. She carried no jewels, no perfume, only her story. The room quieted. "My name is Amara," she began, her voice steady but gentle. "And just like many of you, I once had nothing." The girls leaned forward, eyes wide. "I lost my parents when I was 11. I lived under a roof where I was treated like a burden. I ate scraps. I wore torn clothes. I slept outside in the cold when I was punished." She paused, scanning the room. "But let me tell you what I did not lose. I did not lose my kindness. I did not lose my heart." Some girls wiped their eyes. Others lowered their heads, nodding slowly. "People will call you useless," Amara continued. "They will say you are too poor, too quiet, too weak. But hear me well, you are not too anything. You are enough." The hall grew so silent, her words seemed to echo. "You don't need a rich man to save you. You don't need a title to be important. Just be good. Stay kind. Help others. Work hard. And when the door finally opens for you, because it will walk in with your head high." The girls erupted into applause, some standing, some clapping with tears streaming down their cheeks. One small girl rushed forward and hugged Amara tightly. Amara bent down, hugging her back, whispering, "I believe in you." Later that night, back at the mansion, Amara stood on the balcony with Chike. She gazed at the stars, her heart full. "I used to think my suffering was a curse," she said softly. "But now I see it was training to carry hope for others." Chike smiled, pride shining in his eyes. "You've turned your pain into purpose. That's something money can never buy." Amara rested her head on his shoulder, her chest light. For the first time, she knew her story wasn't just survival, it was a beginning. Years slipped by, quiet but steady, like the tide on the Niger River. The girl once mocked as cursed was no longer whispered about in shame. Now, people spoke her name with respect, Amara Obiakor, the woman who turned pain into purpose. Her foundation had grown beyond the first center. 10, then 12, then more centers opened across Nigeria. In Enugu, widows baked bread that fed half the town. In Asaba, young girls learned tailoring and sold their designs at the market. In Abuja, orphans studied computer skills, their eyes shining with possibilities their parents never had. Everywhere, the mark of Amara's heart lingered not in marble halls or golden gates, but in the laughter of women who once wept, in the steady hands of girls who now stitched their own futures. Each morning, Amara rose before the Sunday. She tied her wrapper with care, simple but neat, and walked the halls of her home with quiet gratitude. The mansion had become less of a palace to her and more of a headquarters for hope. Letters came, daily requests, thank yous, invitations to speak. And though her staff could have answered them, she often sat down herself, penning replies in her gentle hand. One afternoon, she visited a new bakery run by women her foundation had trained. The smell of fresh bread and meat pies filled the air. She watched a teenage girl, flour dusting her cheeks, pull a tray from the oven with practiced ease. The girl's smile reminded Amara of her younger self, the same spark, the same hidden strength waiting for light. A journalist asked her once, "Madam Amara, what changed your life?" She had smiled softly and answered with just one word: kindness. For it was kindness that had carried her through the years when cruelty tried to bury her. Kindness that had drawn Chike to her, disguised as a beggar. Kindness that had led her to forgive when bitterness could have been her weapon. And it was kindness now that fueled everything she built. But Amara never forgot her roots. On a quiet morning, she asked Chike to take her to the village cemetery. Together, they walked to the mango tree where her parents lay. The grass had grown tall, swaying in the breeze, but the place still held its sacred calm. Amara knelt, pressing her palm against the earth. "Mama, Papa," she whispered, her voice trembling yet strong. "I made it. I am no longer hungry. I am no longer despised. The people who mocked me now greet me with respect. And more than that, I am happy, truly happy." Her tears fell silently onto the soil. "Thank you for teaching me kindness, even when you had little to give. I carry your words every day, and now, through me, others will carry them too." Chike stood a little apart, giving her space. When she rose, he took her hand. Together, they planted flowers by the grave, bright blooms that would remind any passerby that beauty can grow from broken ground. As the years passed, Amara became more than a wife, more than a benefactor. She became a symbol. Young girls in villages told her story as inspiration. Widows spoke of her visits as though they were blessings. Even elders who once doubted her admitted she had been chosen for something greater. Yet through it all, Amara remained the same woman who once bent to wash clothes at dawn, who once carried firewood with steady steps. Wealth had not changed her heart. It had only given her the tools to spread what was already there. One evening, she stood on her balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and crimson. Children laughed in the distance, women's voices carried on the wind. She touched the silver necklace Chike had once given her, the pendant engraved with a single word, seen. She whispered into the fading light, "I was seen, and because of that, I can now see others." Her story had begun in ashes but ended in flame, not the fire that destroyed, but the fire that warmed, that lit paths for others. That was Amara's legacy, not riches, not titles, but the proof that patience, kindness, and forgiveness could turn even the most broken beginning into a radiant ending.